Hello and welcome back to Health Unlocked, the Power of Salutogenesis with Jasen Petersen. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Jason, today's episode is not like I know this because we planned it, but it's going to be a lot of personal stories that we want to hear today.
Yeah, and so I hope I don't get too upset and emotional during this.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I think uh it is important conversation and this is why we titled today's conversation as the cost of doing good, how hard it is to help people. So I'm going to dive in directly to the first question. In past episodes, we have hinted at the challenges of trying to help people. We even discussed the cost analysis and everything. But today we are diving into that all the struggles head on. So why do you think so many people assume that if something is good and helps people, it should automatically succeed? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be an inventor, and I remember hearing the old saying, paraphrased from Ralph Waldo Emerson, that the build a better mousetrap, and the world will beat a path to your door. Swear that used to be a thing. And I thought that if you created something that generally helped people, and if you solved a real problem, the world would kind of show up. Of course, I didn't understand marketing at the time. Um, Honestly, maybe I still don't. I don't know. Even now, there's a part of me that still naively believes that marketing should just be awareness, right? And that i- if you clearly show people a good solution to their problems, then that should be enough to succeed. But I realize that's not how it works. It's not how the world works. Marketing today is so slick and so overproduced that even when you do have something better, people assume it's just marketing hype. And I guess I've always tried to take a product first approach to build something real, make it work. But I've kind of learned the hard way that having something better doesn't necessarily mean you'll succeed, right? And I guess I don't know. From my perspective, the one saving grace is that marketing gimmicks fade pretty quickly. But if your product is truly better, its value lasts. Um, and to be honest, so creating things that help people has never been the issue for me. That's not the hard part. The hard part's actually being allowed to help people. Um, and apparently, I don't know. That's not a straight path to success. It's sort of a fight, and I guess I I live that fight every day with Eudaimonia and Ionic Alliance.
Yeah. Couple of things that you touch, and one is being a marketer myself. Um, I tend to say now that it should be always in this order: product first, marketing second, third sales, and that's kind of how it should be. But we kind of right now it's not the way it is. And it's also because the the marketing has been not always done in the right way, which created confusion. And once you create confusion, then even the credible resources or credible products lose. Those are lost in the confusion. They don't have that much credibility, and that's kind of what the challenge we are living in. It's so much information, misinformation altogether, and then now how do you break the ceiling to get out of that? So, and that's kind of a challenge right now in the current world, especially with everything digital. This is more and more just increasing. But the other thing is a little unexpected for me. What you said, like not allowed to be able to do the thing, and that's the part I want to touch in our next question. So, yes, you built Eudaimonia as a salutogenic, community-driven nonprofit. But little on the background, what was the original vision, and you have mentioned this, you know, that before to me, that there was a bureaucratic nightmare you were facing to getting it off the ground. Can you walk us through what happened, so we know exactly what actually happened?
Sure. Okay, so I guess the background is when I lost my parents to cancer, I was determined to do something, anything that could prevent others from going through the same kind of loss. And yeah, I made the emotional and completely unrealistic vow to help cure cancer, but I had no idea how to do that. Um, so I envisioned, creating a place to help people stay healthy in body, mind, and spirit. And when I found an old church campground for sale, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to build a unique nonprofit ministry focused on this salutogenesis. We named it Eudaimonia. Um, and so if you're unfamiliar with the word, eudaimonia means human flourishing, and it's about living in alignment with your highest potential through wisdom, well-being, and purpose. Aristotle used it to describe something deeper than happiness. Eudaimonia is about grow growing into the best version of yourself through learning virtue and meaningful action would probably be the way that he puts it. It's not just about feeling good; it's about living well and making a positive impact along the way. Um, so uh, when I found that church campground for sale, it did seem like the perfect place to bring that vision to life. And before purchasing the property, we talked to all the relevant local agencies, and the local planning and zoning, or P&Z department, initially assumed that I was just some developer and told me the property was designated for a community center in the town master plan, and so that I'd be required to get community support for whatever it is I wanted to do. And when I explained that a community center actually fits my vision perfectly, they said, "Oh, perfect. That sounds great." And so they mentioned that it was zoned mountain residential, even though it has two large commercial buildings on it. Um, they said, but that wouldn't be an issue because the previous ministry, or church, that was here, that their special use allowances would just carry over to our ministry if we started within 180 days, technically. But they also assured me that they wouldn't actually enforce that deadline if we were a little late, because how'd they put it? We're not in the business of shutting down ministries or something like that. And then they also mentioned that uh, let's see, there were a couple technical difficulty things that they wanted to clean up. One was an unbuilt platted road. So there's a road platted to go right down the center of the property. Never been built. Nobody ever knew it was there. Well, I guess somebody knew that it was going to be there. And then I guess one of the buildings is actually too close to another. So everything looked good. We moved forward. We started cleaning up the property, and our first, service, put that in little finger quotes, was the Christmas of 2016. And just for reference, that 180-day deadline was sometime in mid to late January. So we technically made it about 2 or 3 weeks. So 4 months later, in April, 2017, P&Z sent a letter demanding proof that we had started on time. So exactly what they said they wouldn't do. And I was a little disappointed in them, but I assumed that it was some technicality. I wasn't too terribly concerned. I asked them what proof would suffice, and they said that we should send participant letters. That should work fine. And the people who had been coming loved what we were doing. They were happy to write P&Z and say that they had come on Christmas or I guess it was also some came on New Year's. Um, and so it probably didn't take us more than a week or two to respond. And then we didn't hear everything, or we didn't hear anything back. So we just kind of kept on working and cleaning the property up. The property had a lot of issues. It hadn't been taken very good care of. So by the time the summer rolled around, the local fire department and the local improvement association, they asked us to host the 4th of July celebration. So Indian Hills, that's a little town we're in, is a little town. It's tiny, um, but it throws a huge Independence Day celebration every year. There's a community pancake breakfast, a 5K run, and a parade that then devolves into a town-wide water fight. So it's actually really fun. Um, in any case, so we opened Eudaimonia for the community to come in and see all sorts of parkour and Ninja Warrior obstacles and things, and it was a lot of fun. Huge success. And so, following the reception that we received there, we kind of naively assumed that because we started on time, and now the community was also asking for our services, we believed that we were good to operate, and we spent a couple more months um, operating pretty slowly, not really advertising and stuff because we were more focused on trying to fix the property up than increase membership, and we kind of ramped up in October, so it was still 2017. Then November, Planning and Zoning responded to our letters that we gave them back in whenever it was April, and our assumptions were wrong. And I don't know why it took, what's that, 6, 7 months to conclude that the evidence that we supplied them, that they said didn't sufficiently prove that we started in time. And I guess now that I think about it, I suspect that they were, this was just a delay tactic. And their hope was that the lack of cash flow to offset expenses would force us to close down. So there are our tax dollars at work. Um, so we hired a lawyer. It was really kind of our only recourse at that point. I can't really say it was an unbridled success because without our consent, he just kind of made an agreement with planning and zoning that we'd rezone the property in exchange for being allowed to continue operating in the short term. And I didn't want to sign that agreement because it said that if they denied our application, that we would just voluntarily shut down. And remember, P&Z had already lied, and I hadn't budgeted anything for the rezoning because they explicitly told me that I didn't need to. It wasn't necessary. Now, when I expressed this to our lawyer, he came back and said, "Oh, no, no, you don't understand. This is just going to be a rubber stamp process because the property is zoned wrong, and P&Z wants to fix it." And he sent that exact same verbiage, rubber stamp process, to them as well, and they didn't object, and so we signed the agreement. Then all sorts of absurdities kind of started. They wanted drainage studies done as if, so there's 7 buildings on the property that have been here since before before zoning existed. And they wanted us to pretend like the buildings weren't here and do drainage studies as if we were going to build these buildings brand new, which didn't make any sense. I mean, that was stupid. Another one was we replaced the old church's sign with one of our own, and they came and told us that signs weren't allowed on residential property at all. That there's no exception. We can't even let you do that. Except that right across the street there are 2 signs: one for a church that's right across the street, one for a park that's right across the street, and down the way is the Indian Hills Community Center sign, which is according to Facebook, the second most popular sign in the country. And all of the property, what they all have in common is that they're all zoned mountain residential. So it's all the same thing. So in any case, I after going through, all sorts of different things, I eventually asked planning and zoning if they still considered this a rubber stamp. process and what was going to go on. And they said, "Oh, there's no such language on the agreement that we signed, and full scrutiny is going to be required." So, unfortunately, the damage was done. We had already signed, so we couldn't really do anything except continue down the path. So, at the first community meeting, this is where you put up signs, and then they let the community come and voice their concerns. About 50 to 75 people showed up. All of them were angry, assuming that we were trying to develop something that they weren't going to like. But once we explained our vision, kind of everything shifted, and a few people even stood up and said, "Hey, this sounds great. We should really support this." And I'm not sure that that's ever happened at one of those meetings before. So the community's only concern was they basically said, "Okay, well, we support what you're doing. This sounds awesome, but we're kind of scared that if you ever just sell the property or you go out of business, whatever, somebody else can come along, and because it's rezoned, they can just do whatever they're allowed to, whether we like it or not." And so they said, can we just let Eudaimonia operate without changing the zoning? And P&Z came back, "No, that's impossible." So again, we had no choice but to just kind of keep pushing forward. Um, but every time a new staff member took over the case, which happened a lot, we got a new story, and they wanted to focus on different things. This kind of dragged on sort of for years, and eventually I ran out of money. I didn't have enough to both support the startup operations, especially when those operations were kind of a fraction of what we had planned, in terms of being able to get any cash flow to keep the nonprofit operational, and then also to go through this expensive rezoning. Remember when developers get loans, right? To go through and rezone property, that's because the final result is going to be significant ROI. And that's kind of what pisses locals off, is someone goes and spends enough money to push the rezoning through the bureaucratic channels, and then they make a fortune. But often the local communities left with something in their neighborhood that they never wanted in the first place. And even worse if it's something that means it increases their tax rates. Now, Eudaimonia was kind of just the opposite. Its entire reason to exist was to help make the community better. And uh, just to clarify, I had lots of ideas on what that would be, and the different programs we'd have and all that kind of stuff. But we also wanted the community to have a significant voice in what we did, and we got all sorts of suggestions from like community gardens and a community kitchen and after school programs and recreation. So basically, a community center. Um, and then also, as a nonprofit ministry, Eudaimonia wasn't going to be highly profitable, so banks weren't really lining up to give us any loans. Um, so if I'll try and make this story not quite as long as it could be. So one of the times planning zoning was, claiming that things were taking too long, I kind of sat down with him and said, "Look, you told me rezoning wasn't required before I purchased it. I didn't budget it, or didn't budget for it. And then also because of your restrictions, we've never been able to operate fully. And now I'm out of money. What do you want me to do?" And they said, "Oh, we don't want you to shut down. We think, what you're doing is great." And they proposed a new plan. Keep the mountain residential zoning, but add special use permits or permission for the church ministry, childcare, and recreation. So effectively exactly what they told me would happen before we purchased the property, and exactly what the community originally wanted. The only concern was that, remember that unbuilt platted road? Um, well, it turns out they lied when they said it wasn't going to be an issue to remove it. Um, it was an issue. We couldn't just get rid of it because no one knows who owns it. It was owned by a company that went out of business, so it doesn't exist anymore. And getting rid of it then would be relatively expensive and a hassle. So as long as it doesn't touch one of the buildings, well, then everything's fine. and that whole plan sounded great. And so they uh, they even admitted to there being, lots of miscommunication from the past, and they asked if we could cancel the old application because it looks really bad for them to have it open for such a long time. And they said, "Hey, we can start fresh without all this contentious history, and and it'll be great." Great. So I agreed. I paid for the new expensive survey, um, and it showed that the platted road did not touch one of the buildings, so everything was good. Yay! And we submitted a clean application, a brand new one, just as they requested. And then the staff changed again. Um, and the response that I got back immediately was, "Oh, the history here is really complicated. I'll get back to you in a few weeks." Um, so, so much for starting fresh. And so much for wiping that history clean. Still, we sent out notices to the community explaining the updated plan, um, and how it aligned with their original request. And we received about 300 letters of support back. And in a town of less than 1,500 people, I think there are 1,200 people here. That's a lot. That's massive. Now, granted, many of the people were outside in the neighboring towns as well, but still, we're in a not a heavily populated area. Uh, and this was all kind of leading up to the public meeting. And by then, the public meetings had gone virtual. This was after 2020 now. And right before ours, we got to meet this new staff member on Zoom or something like that. And he told us that, if you haven't gone through this, be aware that there are going to be people and they're going to be all upset and mad. And you just need to let them complain and try and make them feel better because community input doesn't really matter. Um, and a governmental board is who's going to make the final decision. And we kind of scratched our head and was like, well, that doesn't sound good at all. Um, but we explained that the community was kind of fully behind the plan. Um, and then he said, "Oh, well, yeah, we can't do that. You can't remain residential. You're going to have to go through the whole rezoning process from scratch." And so we've been lied to again. And I'm not real sure when I will learn that you can't take someone for their word. You have to get things in writing, especially when uh, they're in the government. I don't know. The, the whole thing was just really, really frustrating, and I don't understand what their agendas are, except collecting as many fees as they can. I don't know, but really, every step of the way, government bureaucracy made it harder, not easier, for us to operate and help people. P&Z wasn't actually the only difficulty. There were other local governmental groups and departments that found ways to demand their own pound of flesh after we had closed on the property, despite assuring us beforehand that everything was in order. And, just the entire experience is a brutal lesson in how difficult it is to help people unless you plan to exploit things to make large sums of money. Ironically, had I just ignored what the community wanted and planned to develop the property for profit, things probably would have been relatively easy.
How long did it take did it get resolved finally or no? Are you
Nope.
still?
No, it's still going. And actually, the latest thing, I finally hired an engineer and said, you know what, because my thinking was, and he had helped us a little bit before, but my thinking was all of the times that they're lying to me, they can't do that to another professional because that other professional will come back and say, "Hey, wait, you told us this. This is what you said." Whereas if I say it, oh, it's just some guy who wants to rezone and is complaining and is making things up. So no, we're in the process again. Actually, I just got an email saying that the little signs are available and we can go through. So they're making us start all over again, again. And I don't know, they charged me, they doubled the fee and charged me for something I don't understand. I guess I'll ask them about it when I go and pick up those signs.
Wow, it's been 7 8 years. It's still going on from the beginning.
Yeah, they're absolutely ridiculous. And the most frustrating part is all of these places, I went and talked to them first. And I said, "Hey, these are my plans." And they said, "Oh, that sounds great. Looks like everything's going to be fine." And all of them then came back after I purchased the property, or we purchased the property, and then had all sorts of demands. Um, and you know,
Yeah. It is.
and talking to lawyers didn't really help a whole ton. So
Yeah. It is a bureaucratic system. That's what it is. So, well, this was on this side. I know you had other struggles when you were bringing eyeball to the market, and that was also kind of a crazy story to me. But like, can you also tell us like what happened there when you were first time when you realized that people weren't just resisting eyeball; they were actively trying to take control of it? Can you talk about that?
sure. So yeah, Eudemonia's problems were all bureaucracy. But when I started helping Kevin bring IBAL to the world, we ran into something even worse. Kind of these unscrupulous people who felt entitled to own the rewards without taking any of the risk or doing any of the work. So let me introduce Kevin. I first met or connected with Kevin when my father ran out of that IBAL product. And in case anyone hasn't seen the previous or listened to the previous episodes, that's IBAL, ion biotechnology aqueous ligands. Um, and I call that eyeball because it's a little bit less pretentious and it's a lot easier to say. But so if you remember, my father had untreatable cancer, and the only thing that did anything was this eyeball based product. And we actually saw pretty amazing results. But then when we ran out, um, no one could tell us what it was or where it came from, and it took me a month to find Kevin. And my father ended up dying the day before I could receive more. And so a little bit of Kevin's history is he'd been a successful real estate developer in Michigan, but after his own standoff with local government and the corruption that he saw firsthand there, he kind of walked away in disgust and settled in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So I guess while he was there, he ended up needing emergency surgery for a kidney stone, and what he found kind of shocked him. The hospital was cleaner and really more advanced than anything he'd seen in the U.S. With top tier care, they spoke perfect English at a fraction of the cost. And that experience kind of became his mission to help people initially. And he also met his wife in Mexico. She's Mexican. And so we stayed and built a thriving medical tourism business, helping people access affordable world class healthcare, right? And really, eh, what Michigander who has a chance to move to Puerto Vallarta wouldn't take it because um,
Yeah.
the winters in Michigan can be rough.
Yeah, I'm not.
Um,
I'm not too far from there, so I can tell you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But so because of his success with that business, a U.S. based company approached him, or a U.S. based group approached him about manufacturing eyeball products. Yeah, I should say eyeball cosmetic products in Mexico, and let's call them Team Paperclip, or TP for short. So he agreed, assuming like any decent person would, that they really wanted to help people, and the need to manufacture in Mexico was purely so that they could keep the cost down to the point where they could actually help people. And but what he discovered though kind of changed everything for him. And as he began really working with the products and developing eyeball products and stuff, he saw healing responses beyond anything he thought, anything that he thought possible. And this is coming from someone who's seeing all sorts of uh, different um, treatments, right? So he knows just about every treatment that there is because, well, he might not anymore. He's been out of that business for a bit. Um, but this stuff was curing untreatable chronic diseases like cancer. And around this time, Kevin's father was dying of age-related disease, I guess you could say old age, um, or old age and not being healthy. And Kevin promised him that he would do whatever it took to make sure that IBAL made it to the world. And I guess so. At first, Kevin kind of just followed the Team Paperclip's lead, but it quickly became clear that they, by the way, they're primarily lawyers. They had no idea how the technology actually worked or what it was. That didn't stop them from making bold medical claims. Um, and remember, they were comfortable saying almost anything because they weren't the ones taking the risks. If the regulars came after anybody, wasn't going to be them. It was going to be Kevin, and they knew that. From their perspective, if he got shut down, they'd just go find somebody else to keep things going. And in fact, they'd apparently done that multiple times before, and that's actually why we couldn't get more of the product when my father ran out. That's why no one knew what it was or where it came from, because it had been supplied by another company, and after the Team Paperclip's medical claims about cosmetics and stuff, whatever, that got them into trouble, and they let that company go bankrupt and kind of looked for another patsy. That's when they found Kevin. Meanwhile, Kevin did all the work. He did the product formulation. He got manufacturing going, regulatory compliance, customer support, all that kind of stuff. And he didn't get any support from TP, but he did pretty well regardless. He's a really good entrepreneur. And as more people started using the products, he realized they didn't just need the products; they also needed guidance on how to use them. And so he created a free coaching platform to help people understand how to effectively use the products. And on top of that, what he'd also learned, about all sorts of other different treatments through his years in the international medical tourism, right? And so, um, besides ensuring that everything was compliant on his side and that none of his marketing or advertising made medical claims, the only thing that he could really do to mitigate the risk caused by Team Paperclip's actions and going around making these claims was to kind of set a standard policy that he'd refund anyone for any reason, no questions asked. No, but he collected thousands of testimonials and funded early stage research. And that work, I guess, led to formal preclinical studies showing that IBAL wasn't just a cosmetic product. It actually had antimicrobial, antioxidative, and even anti-cancer potential. And he became the global supplier of IBAL-based products. And his success led to Team Paperclip deciding it was time to go big. And they proposed a collaborative effort to develop a regulated drug product in Mexico. TP said they had all the patents. They could supply pharmaceutical grade IBAL, or the API, active pharmaceutical ingredient. And they wanted to bring all of Kevin's research into a formal IP structure. So this plan sounded legitimate on paper, I guess, and they promised to share costs and collaborate on development and include everyone fairly. But right after signing the agreement, so everyone came down to Puerto Vallarta and they signed this agreement. They handed then Kevin another one that assigned ownership of the entire Mexican, well, not the entire Mexican development company, but the portions that he had just signed away. They now said, okay, sign all this over to this other company that doesn't exist yet. And that's not legal to do in Mexico, so it didn't happen. But their intent was kind of crystal clear there. Now, regardless, Kevin moved forward because he really felt that this needed to happen. And when TP failed to contribute funding, he committed his own, right? So he started to reinvest 100% of the profits from the cosmetic sales, and he secured a performance-based government grant in Mexico with a personal home as collateral. So what that means is that, now that the risk or the personal risk is real. If the drug development failed, someone was losing their house. But again, he he knew what it was going to do because of what the thousands of cases that he'd seen. Um, so by that time, I'd been working with Kevin for a few years, and we'd become close friends. And unlike the TP crew, I never asked for money. I was just trying to help. And in fact, I tried to fix things here. I this is when I founded the Ionic Alliance Foundation, and in part to help mend kind of the bad blood between Kevin and Team Paperclip. And the idea was to have IAF hold the IP, this new IP that was being created, with a clear public mission to help people. And I created a shared governance model, one board member from each of these parties, and both Kevin and the inventor, who was part of Team Paperclip, trusted me enough to move forward with this. And then to make this even more real, IF signed a pro bono agreement with one of the largest pharmaceutical law firms in the world to develop the patent. And so Kevin agreed and handed over all of his confidential data to IF to get the patent put together. And it was taking a really long time. And then kind of around that time, Team Paperclip refused to sell Kevin any more of the API to use in either the medical product or the cosmetic product. I mean, so they were trying to lead him dry. And then the inventor died. I was actually relatively close to him. He actually, I was listed in his obituary as one of his dearest friends. Um, and when he passed, everything kind of shifted even more. And I kind of want to step back just for a second because I like to believe that the inventor was a stand-up guy and he was just being manipulated and taken advantage of by a bunch of slimeball lawyers. Um, I'm having a tough time reconciling why he allowed them to do all the nasty things they did. Um, and so maybe I should say I'm choosing to believe that the inventor was a nice guy who was being manipulated. But I just wanted to throw that out there. So now, suddenly, after he died, no one was returning my calls, the lawyers or the patent firm, and we kind of had no idea where the IAF patent work stood. And at the same time, we were getting dangerously close, or Kevin was getting dangerously close to approving or getting an approved drug in Mexico without having a patent to back it up. And that can be kind of dangerous. Um, so And on top of that, we also kind of started to realize that the inventor, despite years of claims, he didn't actually know what IBAL was. And he wasn't really the inventor, um, because all the patents that he had, the ones that original agreement were based on, they'd all been abandoned. And it turned out that they were all based on fabrication. Um, and so, of course, none of the lawyers could handle the science because, uh, their chief scientist didn't know what it was. So after all of this, Kevin was kind of ready to walk away. He was pretty burnt out and disgusted with humanity. But I convinced him that we needed to keep going. And I brought in another friend. He's a brilliant inorganic chemist who helped us really understand what eyeball was. And he actually met me through Eudaimonia. And he trusted me enough to throw hours of his time at this without knowing if I could ever pay him. And he once called me the most genuine person he'd ever met. So I guess, I don't know, I guess saying you want to help people is a common way to make a buck. So continually losing money with Eudaimonia and still trying to help the community convinced him I was genuine. In any case, together we developed the first real pharmaceutical grade version of the API. We filed our own patents. We really figured out how we could put everything else, all sorts of other uh, metals and ions into it. Um, And it wasn't until a little later that we discovered that that big law firm had written a patent, and they assigned it to a different company, one that was controlled by that same group of swindlers, the team paperclip. So that wasn't really, I mean, that wasn't just betrayal, right? That's malpractice and outright theft. So we kind of had to fight it. And there was legal maneuvering, and the team paperclip lied in court. They blocked, stalled, and threatened, and everything they could do. All the while, uh, all the time they knew that we had to pay lawyers to do all of this, and while they didn't, because they were lawyers themselves, so they didn't have the same expense. But in the end, their patent was all wrong because they didn't ever understand it. And actually, there were some mistakes in the data that we gave them, but they never talked to us long enough for us to explain it. And then they just based their patent completely on that data, and some of that data was bad. And so, again, the inventor put it in little finger quotes. He didn't understand this, so it's understandable that the rest of Team Paperclip wasn't going to figure it out either. So in any case, their patent's worthless, but ours isn't. And so I guess not only did we rescue the technology, we got a breakthrough medical product approved. Remember, ion gel, ZCM25, is now being used to treat wounds and infections that standard treatments can't resolve. Um, and it's helped multiple people avoid amputations that were considered inevitable. And while it's officially approved for infection control, we still have all of the preclinical and anecdotal evidence of IBAL's efficacy on chronic diseases, including cancer. Um, so, really, because of all of this, IBAL could have become another innovation buried under greedy and blind ball lawyers, but we didn't let that happen. We held the line, and we've proven that, I guess, sometimes when you refuse to sell out, and when you build a mission around helping people, it's possible to do something that actually makes a difference. But it is hard, especially when the systems um, that should support innovation are the ones trying to crush it. And the path isn't for everyone, because sometimes you don't really live to tell that tale, depending on how disruptive you are.
Yeah.
And actually, I apologize, but can I tell one more quick thing here? So I've had far more bad experiences with lawyers than good ones, for sure. This is kind of a crazy, but I'll make it quick story. So a lawyer who was defending eudaimonia from someone who made up completely baseless charges, again because they felt entitled. They started by claiming sexual discrimination, which never really made sense to me. But I wouldn't have it, and made it clear that I'd kind of die on that hill defending eudaimonia. So they shifted the claim. They just dropped that entirely. They shifted to claim one of the eudaimonia employees trespassed on their property. It was utterly ridiculous, and they got caught lying multiple times. So this really, I mean, it was an open and shut case, or should have been. I mean, we couldn't. Uh, but our lawyer decided that he no longer wanted to be a lawyer right before the trial. And I said, okay, what's that mean for me? He said, oh, nothing, I'll still defend you to the best of my ability. And then after this, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. Okay. But in truth, he thoroughly checked out. He let them enter doctored evidence, and then forgot to enter our evidence proving that they were lying. And he later claimed that that was somehow a strategy. Obviously we lost, and guess who had to cover all the costs? That would be me. But there's more to the story, but I'll stop there because my actual point is that I have another really good friend who happens to be a brilliant lawyer. And he wasn't licensed to practice in Colorado, but he finally decided to get one. And is now excited about being the in-house corporate counsel for Eudaimonia Ionic Alliance Group and Ionic Alliance Foundation. So, not all lawyers are bad, I guess, is my point there. And then the other thing I kind of want to say is that with as many times as I've been taken advantage of here, I'm starting to sound very naive. And I'm actually, I want to be the type of person who believes in people. Um, so even knowing that many times I'm going to be taken advantage of, I prefer to trust somebody until the trust is broken, if that makes sense. And Kevin is very similar. And there have been multiple times that either one of us could have swindled the other out of tons of money. We also understand that this can't, while maybe this can continue personally, it can't continue professionally. And to put it lightly, that lawyer friend is upset enough with everyone who's taken advantage of. He said that he's not going to let this happen again. And again, while I've been burned a lot, it's also become really clear who the really good people are around me. So if you're a genuinely good person, we might hit it off.
Yeah. Well, um, lots of sacrifices through this fight and everything that you explained. But can you share what you and your team sacrificed to keep these projects alive a little bit on like what was the cost? Like what happened exactly?
Well, so for me, the biggest price was the house that my father built. All the profit from my medical device business was needed to keep Eudaimonia afloat and satisfy PNC's requirements and stuff. So I had to mortgage the house to have enough money to live and take care of my family. Um, then when the world governments decided to close the world down for COVID, I was forced to sell the house entirely and move onto Eudaimonia's property. My business on paper, should have been highly profitable, but almost every dollar I earned went right back into Eudaimonia and IBAL clients. But I wasn't the only one not making money. Kevin has worked probably 60-hour weeks for over a decade now, and he's never taken a salary. His wife gets paid and his company covers his basic expenses, but he's never received a salary, right? He still drives a 20-year-old pickup truck in Mexico. So it's not like he's rolling in cash. And, so he's sacrificed years of his life to push this forward without seeing a dime in return yet. And we've both watched people who contributed very little try to claim ownership and or control what we built. And we've seen people with wealth and power try to shut it all down or take control of it. And at every step of the way, we kind of have to ask ourselves, do we keep going? Is this worth it? And luckily, the answer every time has been yes. Um, because if you remember, this started with promises we made to our now deceased parents, and those really aren't the kinds of vows to walk away from. But it also forced us to rethink everything and how we operate and how we're going to fund this and how to make the mission sustainable.
Yeah. Crazy. We've spoken today a bit about like, you said it before that the system isn't broken by accident. It is designed to protect the profits. And those who can develop a profitable treatment, keeping people sick who will need treatments, etc. And that's the cycle, right? So, can you explain why healthcare resists innovations like this? Like, why are we stuck into this limbo, to say so, which which cares about more profits than human life, which is kind of does not make sense at any level.
Yeah, absolutely. So the bureaucracy always gets in the way. It's bloated and inefficient, right? But the healthcare system itself isn't just bloated or inefficient. It's kind of been engineered to protect profitable recurring revenue streams. That's the business model. Big pharma doesn't want cheap, effective treatments. They want drugs that people have to take every day for the rest of their lives, or that require, constant expensive management. That's where the profits really are. And a therapy like IBAL that will actually restore health doesn't fit that model well. And if we take the traditional route, raising venture capital, we'd be pushed to hand over control to an established pharmaceutical company. And IBAL will either be buried or neutered into something unrecognizable. At best, it would be priced at a level most people could never afford. And so IBAL challenges the entire system by proving that a real solution doesn't have to be, the toxic, invasive, or unaffordable uh, solutions that we're seeing from pathogenic uh, healthcare. And that's why it never really survived inside the system as it exists. And we kind of have to build a different path.
Okay. And what is that different path? So we've traditional biotech funding would force eyeball into their system and make it another expensive restricted drug. You said maybe they would even kill it because this is counter to their whole business model, or they make it expensive and then it's the same thing as any other treatment. So how does eyeball's alternative funding model can break free from this trap? Like, what is that path?
Um, I mean, so far we have been bootstrapping everything. And I think I've mentioned before that bootstrapping drug development is not something that I would ever suggest because something like 97% of all pharmaceuticals fail. So it's really risky. Now, in truth, it can also be when things don't fail. It can be the most profitable thing around. Maybe second to like some of the cryptocurrency things that are happening nowadays, where pennies suddenly turn into thousands of dollars, or you know. But so again, we've been bootstrapping up until now, and we haven't really taken friends and family money much at all because we do know that it's so risky. And I kind of felt a little bad trying to pull anybody else into that. But, I'm fully committed. Yes, I've seen all sorts of successes. Yes, but other people haven't. And Kevin kind of felt the same way. So we did as much as we could for as long as we could. Now we're at the point where we've got an approved product. We've proven that it didn't fail. So we've basically done all the hard part. We've gotten rid of all the risks. But moving from here on, so we've put in a few $1 million, I should say millions of dollars. But moving forward, it's significantly more expensive to get to distribution and increasing manufacturing and so on and so forth. So we are kind of having uh, to figure out how to get funding. And from day one, we knew that our mission would get hijacked if we brought eyeball to the world in the conventional way, right? So we did something different. We placed the IP under a nonprofit, the Ionic Alliance Foundation, and then we created Ionic Alliance Group, a for-profit arm to raise capital and do all of the work. That way, no matter what happens to the for-profit company, if we lose control, somebody else takes over, whatever, the technology still, we can ensure that it still stays tied to the mission and not solely to profit. But I need to be clear. We expect that the for-profit company is going to do really well, just not with profit being the main priority. But so if we'd followed the traditional biotech funding plan, we'd probably have more money than we know what to do with. But eyeball would be locked behind a paywall or worse, buried. Um, and that model really depends on massive rounds of investment from different firms that ultimately want an exit, right? They want their return. And that's either through an acquisition to big pharma, probably the most common, or by some public offer. And once that happens, the mission kind of gets sold along with everything. And so that's why we're planning something different for funding. So we've got a few different ideas. One is that we want to use a multi-layered kind of funding structure that gives supporters um, real access to the upside, but also protects the mission. Right. So that's our goal here. First layer we're calling ion gel shares, and it's essentially a pre-sale model backed not by speculation but by actual product. So the ion gel, uh, that is the product, the ion gel. Um, that is an approved product. It's ready to sell today. And so the idea here is that individuals get to purchase production batches of ion gel at a discount. And I mean, even before they're manufactured or sold to distributors. Then when the inventory moves, we buy that back from them at full price and they make a profit. Their money doesn't depend on a speculative stock price in that situation. It depends on well, you could say real world healing here, um, whenever the product is sold. And we plan to build it on blockchain based smart contracts. So the system will be fully transparent, and we technically wouldn't own, or the Ionic Alliance Group wouldn't own the product anymore. So once it's sold to the distributors at whatever the price is, the full price, that immediately gets transferred to the owners, the individuals who believed in us. And so it's structured, automated, and kind of investor aligned. And I guess in a worst case scenario where we completely fail, the investors own assets that can't be liquidated underneath them, and that's actually something that has always sort of pissed me off. I once invested in a company that went under. It had plenty of assets, and they all got liquidated to pay the preferred investors. And I wasn't on that list. And so all of the regular folks like me got left with nothing. Um, and so the ion gel, the, that's actually harder to say than I expected. We're going to call it IGS. That's easier to say. So the IGS is also scalable here. And over time, as production volume grows and turnaround times shrink, we're thinking that it will actually evolve from a funding tool to an ongoing advocacy engine, kind of a way for supporters to have a direct stake in the product's success. Now, so that's tied to a product, but we also have, some kind of amazing ideas for what the APIs can do in the future. And so, eventually we plan to layer in a blockchain-based equity crowdfunding, but with, predefined valuation milestones that are tied to real KPIs or milestones. And that means that the supporters or investors then can benefit from the company's growth without the usual kind of smoke and mirrors. You never really know what's going on here, but when everything, when you've got it in a smart contract blockchain, everyone can see what's happening. And the other kind of nice thing with that is the investors would have a really clear picture of what their ROI will be at any given milestone. And again, remember, right? So yeah, we've got the strong product now. And let me try and qualify that. So it's realistic to think that the ion gel can make the threat of amputation almost a thing of the past for diabetic wounds, and maybe eliminate or severely or significantly reduce surgical site infections and hospital-acquired infections. So all by itself, the impact of the ion gel can be huge. But we also have the IBAL technology itself to help fix the biggest problems in healthcare worldwide, really. So instead of selling out to the system, we're trying to build a funding model that ensures our mission is followed long term, aligns with incentives, and rewards people for helping us bring healing to the world.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's a great idea for everything mission, transparency, and ownership from the people who are actually believes in this or actually see the value in doing this, but also ownership as in ownership of something that can lead to some reward for them later on too. So this is a very fascinating idea. And so for those who are listening, how can they help support this movement? What would you say there?
Well, I guess if you're still listening, there's a good chance that you see the same problems that we do, and you're probably just as frustrated with how broken the system is, um, or how broken the system seems. And it's really, this isn't just about eyeball, right? It's about proving that innovation ethics and access don't have to be in conflict. We're not trying to win within the current system. We're building something outside of it, something that hopefully will actually work. And if you believe in this, if you want to help bring real solutions to real people, please reach out. Whether you're a healthcare provider, an investor, a researcher, or just someone who wants to help. Trying to build a network of people who are ready to change the game, not just complain about it, I suppose. It's a long fight, but we've already proven what's possible. And now we just need people who want to be part of what's next.
So who should reach out in this community? Is it for anyone can reach out who's interested in this mission, or is it like a certain set of people you would be like, more value add to this mission?
Well, I mean, we need investors for sure. Um, and if people are interested in the a couple methods that I mentioned, one the ion gel shares or IGS, or and blockchain backed equity crowdfunding, and encourage us to go that route, that's great. Healthcare providers could continue or start purchasing cosmetics now. They won't be able to make medical claims with them, but that doesn't mean they don't work. Um, if researchers want to start researching eyeball, we can discuss that. Um, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things to do. So if you think you can help, I encourage you to reach out.
Got it. And what is like the first step in your roadmap for eyeball? Let's say once the funding is secured, what's like on the roadmap there?
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is increase and get distributors throughout Mexico and then Latin America for the ion gel right now. That's going to take a decent amount of work because we actually have quite a bit of interest. The problem that we're running into is we need to raise a lot of money just to be able to support those contracts. So we don't want to accept a contract that we wouldn't be able to fulfill. That means that we have to increase manufacturing, both in the US, where the API is produced, and everything in Mexico, where the finished products are produced. Um, we need to do, well, I mean, the IP is going to be a continual work in progress forever, adding new things that we learn. So that's always going to be happening. Depending on how much funding we get, we might immediately take the ion gel into a skin cancer trial. Granted, we would put it into we would call it a different product, and actually even have to set up a different company in Mexico. Again, we already know what's going to happen, but now we'll have proof. And at the same time, we will take the ion gel, and after we um, have enough distribution in Mexico, we will then branch that out into Latin America. During that process, we'll probably also get the CE mark on the ion gel. We've already gone through that process and shown that we can do it. There are a few peculiarities around how Mexico and the rest of the world handle quality systems. So we're going to have to we'll have to harmonize those systems a little bit. And then with the CE mark, then we'll need to be able to find distributors in Europe and or any country that accepts the CE mark. Then probably start bringing it into Australia, Canada, Japan. Actually, Japan might be earlier there because they do have a cosmeceutical classification, which is sort of a cross between cosmetic and a pharmaceutical. What else? Then we can start working on the development process for injectable versions of IBAL and or nebulizable versions of IBAL. And that's going to take a ton of money. So probably what we're going to do there is get it to the point where, we're somewhere around phase 2 clinical trials, and then sell those off, those specific indications or products off to a larger pharmaceutical. Now, at this point, it makes more sense. That might sound like that's within the system, but not really. And in the end, the distribution is going to have to be handled by these larger companies that are already doing it. Because developing a worldwide distribution from nothing is going to be take more money than we want to raise.
Yeah. All right. Any last words for our listeners who are probably interested in joining this movement, or how can they, or what's the next step they can take?
Well, I guess if you find this encouraging, let me know, and reach out and share it with other people. Actually, more than anything else, share it with other people so that people know that this stuff exists.
All right. So if this is for our listeners, if you find this or this resonates with you, it's something big that Jasen and his whole team, Kevin and everybody's trying to solve or bring to the market, reach out to us directly, and you can reach out to us through the podcast website. You will see there's a form. We get inquiries or questions, and people can contact us. People can also directly reach out to all the links that we have in each podcast, which directly goes to the foundation's website. So you can also reach out there. And yes, the biggest thing, share with more people, spread the word. That helps. And we've started to see an uptick of also some more questions from people, but we want to see more from you and reaching out to us. So thanks again, Jasen, for sharing your journey thus far. It has been an incredible journey in terms of resilience and fight that you have to counter all these unexpected. You would think all these things would work in, especially a first world country, but unfortunately, it seems like you had to like continuously fight the system, the bureaucracy, and even these unexpected things. Like who would think that there's like people trying to take away your intellectual property and all that stuff. That's crazy, especially the people whom you hired to do certain job file for you. So it's really wild in that way. So um, I
There's actually lots more to the story, but it would take a really long time to go through everything. There's lots more.
Yeah, I believe it. 'Cause this is already to me like a very, very crazy thing. Maybe Netflix should also contact us to make a movie on this thing. This is incredible. But again, credit to you and your business partners and everybody who's involved in this to continue to bring this to the market to more hands and still continue to drive awareness. I mean, this take a very thick skin to continue and keep doing it. So you've been doing this, and so a lot of credit goes to everyone who's involved behind this. So on that note, well, we just want to again thank you, Jasen, for sharing this, and we appreciate it. And hopefully, more people who are listening can bring and help us in this direction, so that Jasen and team can continue to move this mission forward. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.